Let me tell you about one of the greatest underdog stories of all time. Seriously, it's a classic tale of tradition versus innovation, David versus Goliath. Except, this battle was fought with wine bottles. This is the incredible story of how one tasting, on one afternoon, brought a centuries-old empire to its knees.
So that's the big question we're tackling. How on earth did a handful of relative newcomers from California manage to topple the undisputed kings of the wine world? The answer is it's so brilliant. And it all came down to one incredibly audacious event right in the heart of Paris.
Now, to really understand just how big of an upset this was, we've got to paint a picture of what the wine world looked like back in 1976. And believe me, it was pretty much a one-party system.
I mean, for literally centuries, there was no debate. If you were talking about the best wine in the world, you were talking about French wine. End of story. Places like Bordeaux and Burgundy weren't just making wine. They were the gold standard. They were the definition of excellence. Everything else was seen as, a decent attempt at best.
And this right here, this just shows you how huge the perception gap was. French wine was the benchmark. It was all about complexity, refinement, tradition. And Californian wine? It was seen as new, totally unproven, and people kind of dismissed it as being too simple, just a fruit bomb. It wasn't just a gap in reputation, it was a canyon.
So how do you even begin to challenge a system that's built on centuries of reputation and, let's be honest, prejudice? Well, you come up with a plan so simple, so audacious, that it forces everyone to judge on quality and nothing else.
And this is where our hero enters the story. Stephen Spurrier, an Englishman running a wine shop in Paris. He had actually tasted these new wines coming out of California, and he believed they were something really special. He was absolutely convinced that if he could just get them in front of the right people, without the labels, they could prove how good they really were.
And his secret weapon? The blind tasting. You gotta understand, this is the great equalizer in the wine world. When you hide the bottle's identity, you strip away everything else. The history, the fancy label, the price tag, all the preconceived notions. All that's left is what's actually in the glass. It's a pure, unfiltered test of quality.
So the method was just brilliant in its simplicity. Step 1, hide all the bottles. No one could see the labels. Step 2, serve them anonymously. The judges knew they were tasting, say, a Chardonnay, but they had no idea if it was from France or California. And finally, step 3, they scored each wine from 0 to 20 based only on what their senses told them. No reputation allowed, just taste.
And so, we arrive at the main event. The date is May 24th, 1976. The place? The Hotel Intercontinental in Paris. The stage was officially set for a showdown nobody saw coming.
And just look at this jury. Spurrier put together an all-star panel of 11 of the biggest names in French wine. We're talking top critics, legendary sommeliers, the heads of the most famous estates. These were the gatekeepers of quality. And here's the kicker. They walked in thinking this was just a cute little promotional event. A chance to humor the Englishmen and confirm what everybody already knew, that French wine was simply better. So this really frames the matchup perfectly. In one corner, you've got the reigning champions, legendary white Burgundies and world-famous Bordeaux Reds, wines with centuries of prestige. And in the other corner, you have the challengers, a Chardonnay from a place called Chateau Montelena and a Cabernet from Stag's Leap Wine Cellars in California. It was basically icons versus total unknowns.
So the tasting begins. The judges are swirling, sniffing, tasting, and scoring. They have absolutely no idea that their final verdict is about to send a seismic shockwave through their entire world. All right, first up were the white wines, the Chardonnays. The judges are tasting through them, pretty confident they know which ones are their world-class Burgundies and which are the, Californian upstarts. The scores were tallied up.
And the winner is Chateau Montelena from California. You could have heard a pin drop. A palpable shock just filled the room. The judges were completely stunned. Some of them actually tried to take their scores back. But hey, the numbers don't lie. The underdog had just beaten the champions at their own game.
Okay, fine. But surely that was a fluke. Now came the real test. The red wines, the legendary Bordeaux Reds. This was the absolute pinnacle of winemaking. This is where French dominance was considered totally, completely untouchable.
And then the impossible happened again. First place went to Stag's Leap Wine Cellars Cabernet Sauvignon. A wine from California had just been judged as better than the greatest red wines of France by France's own top experts. The room was in absolute, total disbelief.
This quote just captures the reaction perfectly. It wasn't just surprise, it was straight-up denial. The result was so completely against their entire worldview that it just seemed impossible. The very foundations of the wine world had just cracked wide open.
And the shock didn't stop there. The French reporters who were there, they were so stunned, so embarrassed by the outcome, that at first they just refused to report on it. They completely buried the story. But luckily, there was one American journalist in the room, and he made sure the rest of the world heard exactly what went down.
So why does a single wine tasting from nearly 50 years ago still matter so much? Well, because the legacy of that one day in Paris literally created the entire world of wine as we know it today.
Yeah, this really sums up the incredible fallout. Amid the French invincibility, it was shattered overnight. It proved that greatness wasn't tied to one country. You could make world-class wine anywhere if you had the right climate and the right passion. This inspired winemakers all across the New World, in Australia, Chile, Argentina, and it even forced the French to step up their game and innovate. It completely democratized wine for all of us.
And if you want to see the economic impact in black and white, just look at this chart. Before 1976, New World wine exports were basically a rounding error. After the judgment of Paris, the floodgates blew wide open. That one event gave these regions the credibility they needed to compete on the world stage, and the market just exploded. So the next time you're in a wine shop and you're looking at bottles from California, or New Zealand, or Chile, or Australia, sitting right there next to the classic French labels, now you know why. You can thank Steven Spurrier and that one shocking afternoon in Paris. It created this amazing, diverse, competitive world of wine that we all get to enjoy today.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The judgment of Paris proved that even the most deeply entrenched beliefs can be completely overturned when you just strip away the prejudice and judge purely on quality. So what other undisputed truths in our world are just waiting for their own blind test? Thanks for joining us.